Hey there, folks. Welcome into the workshop here with Frank Evans at the online version of the Old Time Banjo Festival. And I'm your host, Brad Kolodner, and we are joined by Cathy Fink, who is our co host and co-conspiring with me this whole weekend to bring all this banjo goodness to you. Appreciate that you've all been. For those of you who have been joining us all weekend, I know we've had a bunch of really great workshops with who do we just have? Lucas Poole, and yesterday we had Adam Hurt and Chris Cool and Evie Ladin. We've got one more after this one here with Frank with Allison DeGroot, and then a whole nother evening of a great concert featuring a bunch of great performers. Cathy, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. That's
All
great.
right, great.
So, as you can see now in this meeting, I encourage you all in the upper right to click on gallery view. You can see how many folks are in here with you. There are about 63 right now. We might be up near 70 by the time we're all said and done. And Cathy, maybe just a quick word about just some other general ground rules for this workshop.
Sure. We've been having a great time with these workshops, and what we found that works really well with Zoom is that throughout the workshop, all of you will be on mute. And if you have a question, please put it in the chat, and Brad or I will be paying attention. And every once in a while, Frank, we might even interrupt you and pop one of those questions, or else we'll make sure they get answered at the end. Frank, did you get to hear that?
Oh,
You got
hold
to
on,
turn your
I need to
microphone on.
unmute him. Yeah, there we
Hang
go.
on a sec. Anyway, folks, even though some of you are going to see your friends on the list and your friends here and there, please keep the chat to your questions because it makes it easier for Brad and I to make sure that they get answered for you. One of the fun things for you is because you're on mute, you can noodle as much as you want, unlike the banjo camps and unlike all the other rules. And you can noodle as much as you want. And other than that, let's see. We are making a recording of this, and you will all be given a link. Frank will get all of your emails, and Frank will get this link. He'll be able to forward it to you with some of the other information on his teaching. I believe his website is frankevans.ca. Is that correct, or is it Frank Evans Banjo? No, frankevans.ca. So we'll put that in the messages here for you to see, and his email as well. And other than that, I think those are all the ground rules. We'll stop, Frank, with the lesson part by about 3:20 in order to make sure that we can answer any other questions. We like to unmute the mics at the end, give people a chance to do some appreciations.
All
And
right.
every once in a while, Frank, if you just kind of stop and say, "Is everybody with me?" we can get some thumbs up or some questions, check in with you about stuff like that. So, did I cover everything, Brad?
I think that's pretty much it. I posted a link to the YouTube stream of this workshop, so in case you get kicked out of Zoom, you can find this workshop streamed on YouTube. That's also where the recording of the workshop will be located. Of course, that recording is unlisted and just for your own personal use, not to be shared with other folks. So that link is also in your email. I sent it out just a few minutes ago. And I think that's about it. So other than just Cathy and I jumping in at random times, it's all Frank from here on out, who's just an incredible banjo player who lives in Toronto these days and plays in a great bluegrass band called the Slow Can Ramblers. And they've actually played right behind me here in this living room a couple of times over the years.
Yeah.
Been a guest of mine on on my radio program on Bluegrass Country Radio, and really thrilled about what he's about to share with all of you. So everybody, let's wave hi to Frank, and we'll get started here with Frank Evans. Take it away.
Hey, folks. Thanks for joining me. Yes, I have played in the back of Brad's set drop. I've also slept in the crawl space underneath the stairs, so I know the house intimately. And it's a great house to play music in. I can attest to that. Thank you guys for showing up today. We're the point of this workshop. It's titled "More Notes," and so what I plan to do with this workshop is that I'm going to teach a version of Blackberry Blossom I have a version tabbed out that I kind of want to teach, and we can make it more complicated or simplify it depending on where people are at with it and the level of thumbs up and things like that. But the idea of this workshop was that I wanted to just show you a couple of techniques that you'll then be able to transfer to other songs. So if there's a song that you're playing that you're having a hard time incorporating, maybe a melodic phrase or a structure, that you'll be able to take some techniques from this workshop and then apply that to that song, and that way you'll be able to sort of connect some of the dots in your playing, because melodic style clawhammer playing is a lot of problem solving. It's not necessarily as simple as, when you're playing something with a flat pick or on a violin. Oftentimes the challenging part is just finding that note on the fretboard, and with the clawhammer banjo, we have this sort of added difficulty of having a sort of a unique right hand approach, which makes it difficult sometimes to find all those notes or to connect those notes together. So I'm going to teach a couple of ways to do that. So I'm going to teach it using this song, Blackberry Blossom. It's a classic song in the old-time bluegrass world, and it sort of follows just a very scalar approach to a melody, and so that's why it's a great song to teach these types of techniques in there. I'm just going to play it a couple times for you guys so you can hear how it sounds, and then I'm going to dive right into the A part, and we'll just go straight into learning it. So here's Blackberry Blossom. So that's the tune, and it's that's at sort of full tempo. So we won't be playing it at that tempo today. We're going to go through it really slowly. And again, there's a lot of those phrases that are sort of, I think of them as dots that are connected. And so we can connect as many of those as we want, or as many of those as you can pick up, and leave some of them out. Because to play the basic melody, the skeleton of the melody is quite simple, actually. So let's go right there. The first thing we're going to dive into is a melodic technique that I use quite a lot, and this is where we actually fret the fifth string. So a lot of people have never done this before, and there's many ways to do that, and different fingers you can use. So if we talk about just the phrase that we're going to play, the first phrase of it is sort of 4 notes, and those notes are, it's a G, A, and a B, and back to this G. Now, you don't have to find that on your instrument, but you just have to sort of visualize that or hear that melody. And where I'm playing that is on the 5th fret, 7th fret, 9th fret, and back to the 5th fret of the first string. Now, we can't play that all on the first string just because the right hand technique that we use doesn't allow us to do this sort of all on one string technique, or single string as sort of bluegrassers call it. It just gets kind of muted and sounds bad. So we have to come up with other ways to play those notes. And one of the reasons that we have to be kind of innovative about this style is because ascending on clawhammer is very difficult. Descending is a lot simpler in clawhammer, but ascending is more difficult. And the reason that is because the techniques that we have in order to play more notes, so playing eighth notes and things like that, the only technique we have is a drop thumbing technique, which is dropping down to a lower string. In other instruments, we can drop up to or we can go up to an upper string, or we can ascend melodically a lot easier. But with banjo, our only way of adding notes to this is really by dropping our thumb. And so that means often the melodic phrase will be descending. It'll be going down as opposed to ascending. So we're going to have to use techniques like this to ascend. So what I'm doing in this first phrase is I'm striking the 5th fret of the first string. My thumb is wrapping around to the 7th fret of the 5th string. So let's find those 2 notes there. And to finish that phrase off, I'm then jumping up to the 9th fret of the first string and finishing it with the open 5th string. So that whole phrase sounds like this. Now, a couple things about that phrase. You don't have to use this 5th fret, or this 5th string, sorry. You can just disregard it, and you can just use the open 5th string if you want. You don't get the same melodic structure, so it would sound like this. But you would get the skeleton of the actual sound of the song. So you could do that if you want. But if you want to connect those dots, this is one way you can do it. And a really useful tip to consider is that the 1st and 5th string are actually the same notes when they get to the 5th fret. So when you're at the 5th fret of the 1st string, it's the same note and same octave as the 5th string. So this is a really handy tool because if you play them at the same fret, so if I play the 1st string at the 7th fret and the 5th string at the 7th fret, those are the same notes. So if there's a line that you want to use that's all on the 1st string, we can always connect those dots by using the 5th string in between. So just as a technique to find those notes in between, that's one. So that's how this...
Hey, a couple quick questions here, Frank. What do you do about the railroad spikes that are on your 7th or 9th fret if you happen to have those on your 5th string?
Yeah, good question. So I do have railroad spikes, and they do get in the way. I mean, one thing that I'm aware of is I'm trying to play just a bit above it, so that closer to the back of the fret. That's sort of standard good left-hand technique is you always want to play as close to the fret as possible. The reason being is it cuts the note off at the right place. So if you're playing in the middle of the fret, you can, and if you're pressing too hard, you're actually bending the note up because it has this sort of cavity that it can bend into between the 2 frets. So the closer to the fret you are, the better. So that's sort of one way to get around that. I have noticed that it'll sound a little more muffled with those the 5th string pegs in there, but that's just sort of, if it's a quick phrase, you won't really notice the difference in tone.
And would you mind just clarifying once more? Somebody asked about hammering on from the 5th to the 7th fret on that 1st string and why you wouldn't do that instead.
Yeah, so the question was why we can't just do this all on one string, which is you could hammer onto that 2nd note, but then you would have to strike the 9th fret again. So it would be hammer on, strike, which is doable, but the more we can avoid playing all these melodic lines on one string, the better. And the reason being is that it's really difficult. You end up using that one motion really way too much, I would say, and it doesn't have the same tone. It doesn't ring out as much, and also it's going to be very difficult to get that up to tempo. So just like you use a guitar pick, you wouldn't just play all downstrokes. You actually want to do up and down strokes. And that's just going to make it more efficient. This is, I would call it melodic style banjo playing. And one of the things that makes it melodic is that we're not just playing it like a guitar. We're actually finding these ways to sort of use different strings, just as you would in sort of melodic banjo or bluegrass banjo playing. So this is just sort of how I'm doing it. And the other thing I should note is that not everyone uses their thumb. Some people, I was just talking to Brad about this, and some people actually use their middle finger. It's going to depend on the shape of your hand and what's comfortable for you. For me, and I think it also depends on sort of the shape of the neck of your banjo and all that stuff. So that's just what works for me is using the thumb, but you can use that middle finger. So I'm going to carry on to the rest of the phrase, and we can come back to a lot of those points, and we'll discuss it in more detail if we need. So the next phrase is a drop thumbing phrase. So what we're going to do is we're going to strike the 7th fret of the 2nd string, pick up the 5th string, and then we're going to do a drop thumb from 7th of the 1st string to 7th of the 2nd string. So that phrase sounds like this. So I'm striking the 7th fret of the 2nd string. Now I'm picking up with the open 5th string, striking the 7th fret of the 1st string. My thumb drops down to the 7th fret of the 2nd string. Let's do that all together. And these are really good phrases just to loop over and over again. So that's definitely a technique that when I'm learning a song like this and trying to build it up melodically, that I'll just take one of these sections and loop it over and over again. So let's try and put those two phrases together. So starting at the 5th fret. I'll do that one more time. We're then going to move on. We're going to do a hammer-on line. So what we want to do is we want to place our finger. We're going to bar the 2nd and 5th string with our 1st finger. So we're going to bar that 5th fret. So we have those two strings planted down. We're going to do a hammer-on from 5th to 7th fret on the 2nd string. Now this is a tricky one. So if you don't get a really loud and clear tone from the hammer-on, that's totally okay. This phrase goes by fairly quickly. So you just kind of want to make sure that note gets added in. And to finish that phrase off, we're going to be doing a drop thumb from the 5th fret of the 1st string to the 5th fret of the 2nd string. So that's... So again, these are all sort of 4-note phrases. So the first 4-note phrases is... So that's what we have up until this point. I'm going to move on, and then we'll go back once we finish this first section of the A part, and we'll come back to some of those things and how we can simplify it or add notes if we want. So once we've done this hammer-on line, we're going to do another drop thumb, which is all in the open. We have open 1st string and a pull-off from 2nd fret of the 3rd string to open. Sorry. So that's open 1st, thumb drops down to the open 2nd, pull off from 2nd to open on the 3rd string. I'm going to connect all those dots again, starting from the top. 3, 4. We're then going to do a C chord. So this is another thing about this song is that because there's so many chords and they change so quickly, if you want variations of this song, a great way to do it is just find these chords in different parts of the fret. So we'll get to that later. But what we're going to do is let's all find a C chord, just a regular C chord. We're in G tuning. And we're going to do a hammer-on to the 2nd fret of the 4th string. So that's... So we have this hammer-on to that 2nd fret so that our, just play a regular claw hammer strum afterwards. We're then going to do an open 4th string and a regular claw hammer strum. So those two lines are... So once again, let's play up into that point, starting at the 5th fret. We're then going to play an A chord. So there's a couple ways you can play an A chord. But the easiest way, because our hand is already in this position, is just to bar the 2nd fret, the whole tuning at the 2nd fret. Now you can do this a couple ways. You can just strike the middle string and do a regular claw hammer strum, which would sound like this. So that's one way you can do it. Using the 3rd string, I'm just doing a regular claw hammer strum. Or you can also do a drop thumb. So you can strike the 2nd string and drop thumb down to the 3rd, which would be, So either of those works. So you can do, or, and we're going to finish this first section of the A part on a D chord, which is, we're going to go to the simplest D chord you can play. First finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, and our middle finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. And we're just going to use our open 1st string to use that as a chord. So we have one strum on the A chord, and that finishes off the first half of the A part. So let's go through that all together. So we're going to start at the 5th fret, and we're just going to play it all the way to what we have at this point. 3, 4. And I'll play that a little bit up to tempo so you can hear how it sort of all fits together. So that's the phrase we've just learned. So we can simplify that, or we can even add more notes if we want. But let's finish off the A part first. And the nice thing about the learning the rest of the A part is that we've already learned most of it. It's very common to a lot of other old-time songs where we have the first A section is repeated the second A section, but they have a slightly different ending. So the ending of the first one, we have this A chord. We go to a D chord. Now we're going to do the second A part. So this is using all the same melodic lines that we just learned. So we're going to start at the 5th fret again. We're going to do our thumb at the 7th. So this line again. Then 7th and 7th where we have... So same as before. We have this hammer-on line, which is 5th fret to 7th fret on the 2nd string. And I'm barring that, actually. So you want to make sure you bar the 5th fret. Then we have an open drop thumb, which is... and a pull-off. And again, all of this is the same. So we're going to do our hammer-on to the C chord. Open 4th string, regular claw hammer strum. Now this is where it changes. So we're going to actually finish the A part with a different ending. And to do that, it's a very simple ending actually, which is nice. We just do a pull off from the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. So that's pull off from 2nd to open. We then strike the 4th fret of the 4th string. Pick up at the 5th string. And a regular just claw hammer stroke on the open 3rd string. So that ending line sounds like this. So that's the whole A section. So let's try playing that all together. We'll play it really slowly. And I'm just going to play it 2 times through and pick up as much as you can of it. These are all really new techniques to a lot of you. So this is fairly intricate stuff and a lot of drop thumbing stuff. So this is not something that you can just learn or hear someone learn and then just play it immediately. And often each section takes a lot of practice. So if you're not following to every section right now, that's totally fine. Took me a long time to get this arrangement up and running. So I'll just count it in really slowly. Let's play through the A section twice through the whole thing. So we're going to do both endings twice. So here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... And again. One more. Nice job. I can see I can't see everyone out there, but I can see a lot of left hands on fretboards, and it looks like they're all in the right place. I can't hear you, so it's hard to tell. But it looks like you guys sound great. That's what I'll say. It looks like you sound great.
Hey Frank, let's just take a second and ask if there's any questions up to this.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's
I'll look at the chat, and if there's any questions, I'll
But it's strangely quiet here for a 70-person banjo class. It's a very unique sound.
Yeah. So okay, let's move on. It looks people can pop questions. Don't forget, you can pop your questions anytime you want to. Yes,
there's
Mark,
questions there.
Ending the first part of the A now.
Yeah, and I should mention. So I have this video will be available on YouTube. I also have a condensed. Very sort of detailed video of an instructional video of how to play this song and this arrangement that I'll send to you all. And I have tablature. So I'll send you all this so that you'll be able to sort of keep track of this arrangement. But yeah, so before we move on to the B part, let's just sort of...
There's a question here, Frank. Somebody's saying, any trouble with fretting with the first and second fingers instead of second and middle at the fifth?
First and second at the fifth.
I think they're talking about this one. And I use my index. Aren't you using your index there?
I'm using my index. Yeah, my first finger to bar. I mean, I'm using my index because it's my strongest finger for that position, and also it allows me to bar with my third finger, which is sort of correct fret placement. So we sort of want to, whenever we're at the basis of a position, and I would say if we're doing this, we're barring the fifth fret. This is where our position starts because our first finger's there. We want to allocate one finger per fret. This is sort of just basic fret technique. So if we were to bar to the 6th fret, which we're not in this case, but if we were going to bar to the 6th fret, you would want to use your middle finger. You wouldn't want to use your 3rd finger. You'd actually want to use your middle finger there. But because we're barring to the 7th fret, we want to use our 3rd finger because it's sort of following this technique of one finger allocated per fret when we're at the bass, and we're using, for this one phrase, we were going to call the 5th fret sort of the start of our position.
And Sally seems to have a question about the drop thumb at the 7th fret.
Yeah. So that is a melodic phrase that it actually utilizes the 5th string in the melody. This is what's so kind of cool about the banjo is that because we have this open tuning, a lot of the melody notes and notes within the song are going to be open strings, which allows us to move up and down the neck. So whenever you have an open string, you often kind of want to use it as much as possible. So we're doing that in this case. And what we're going to do is we're going to place both our fingers. I'm using my middle finger and my 2nd and 3rd finger at the 7th fret of the 1st and 2nd string. So just make sure you find that. It should sound like that. And what we do is we strike the 7th fret. So we're going to strike that with our striking finger. We're going to pick up with the 5th open 5th string. And then we do a drop thumb. So we strike the 1st string, which it's still planted at the 7th fret. And then we drop thumb down to the 2nd string. So we strike the 2nd string, pick up the open 5th, strike the 1st string, and our thumb drops down to the 2nd string. Now, if we were to look at that line sounds like this. But again, back to that original question, we can't play that all on one string. So this is a way we can use the open 5th string in that melody. I really like that phrase. And again, all those notes can ring out while you're doing that. So I hope that answers that question there.
Yeah, somebody's made a comment saying also easier to do from the C to a D7 instead of the D. What do you think?
Also easier to do from the C to the D7. From the C to the D7, where would that be? I'm not sure if I fully understand the question, actually, but maybe if you could elaborate a little bit more on that, and I might understand what section you're talking about. A to D7. So the A chord, which we sort of went over, we can do a couple different right hand techniques. We can just do a regular strum on the open 3rd string, or you can do a drop thumb and an open, or just a regular D chord. And that's because the melody goes, the melody would sort of be, so we kind of want to use as many of those notes as we have, which would be. So that's sort of why we're doing those chords there. Well, maybe I'll move on to the B part now, and I'll do a sort of version of that. We're going to add a couple of things to the B part after we learn the basic version of it. And then, again, like we said, we'll have questions at the end so we can answer all those. And you can also feel free to contact me directly if you have any questions. We can set up a time to just go over the song. So happy to do that with each and every one of you. But let's go to the B part now. And so this is going to the key of E minor. Well, it's staying in the key, actually, of G. But we're going to go to an E minor chord. So let's all find an E minor chord. The saddest of all keys. Actually, C minor, apparently. And we're going to do... So what we're going to do is using this technique that I call double thumbing. I think there's different names for it. But it's basically just... alternating between striking a note and picking up with the 5th string. So it's sort of eliminating the strum out of the clawhammer a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to go strike the low 4th string. So we have this E minor chord planted. So we're going to strike the low 4th string, pick up with the 5th string. Then we go up to the 1st string, which is again at the 2nd fret because we've had this E minor planted the whole time. So those two notes sound like. So that's pretty simple. Then we do an open 1st string and and back to that second fret. So I'm actually keeping my E minor chord planted the whole time, but I am lifting off that first string just to get that open first string and then planting that finger right back down. So that phrase sounds like this. And I'm not sure if you can hear, depending on how clear the feed of this lesson is, but you want those notes to ring out as much as you can. So that would be... And hopefully you'd have a lot of sustain on there. So it looks, from what I can tell, like everyone has that line. So we're going to move on a little bit. We do a similar starting line. We go, we strike the fourth string. Then we go back to the first string, which is again all planted at E minor. But we're going to do a drop thumbing technique this time. So we're going to actually strike the open first string. Thumb drops down to the open second. And then a pull off from second to open on the third string. So we've already done this line actually. So if we put those pieces together, just that second phrase, that sounds like... Let's try that a couple more times. And one more. So you're going to put the whole B section together up until this point. So from the first phrase... So that's the sort of E minor part. We then do the first phrase that we just learned. So that's striking the low fourth string, first string. This is all over E minor. Open first string, back up to the second fret. So we do the first phrase. We have our second phrase, which has the drop thumb, and we go back to that first phrase. And this is where we're going to play. We have a B chord or a B7 chord. And what we want to do is don't get rid of that E minor chord. Make sure you still have that E minor chord fretted. But what we're going to do, and I'm using, you can actually use sort of any finger you want for this chord. So whatever is comfortable for your hand, that's totally fine. But I'll tell you what I'm using. I'm using my middle finger for the fourth string, and I'm using my third finger for the first string. So a lot of people play an E minor chord with their first finger, stuff like that. Let's see if we can all play it with our middle finger on the low string, the fourth string, and our third finger on the first string. And what we want to do for this next section is we're going to keep our third finger on the first string. So we're going to keep it there, but we're going to move our middle finger over to the third string. So we're going to move it over to the third string. We have this chord. So it's second fret of the third string and second fret of the first string. And we're going to slide that up 2 frets and do a regular clawhammer stroke. So that's a slide. And then we strike that fourth fret of the third string again and do a clawhammer stroke. So that section sounds like this. And you are going to have a G. So this is a B chord we're playing. And you have a G on the open fifth string. And that's just sort of how the banjo sounds. It's not going to, that drone string is going to be over a lot of different chords. That isn't necessarily going to be a chord tone. But it's what makes the banjo sound like the banjo. So let's go over all those sections again. So from the top of the B part. I'm going to do that one more time. 3, 4. Now, the good news, I have good news for you all. We've already learned all the sections we need to learn to finish this song off. So that is going to sound like this. We use the same phrase that we opened with. So we have... Then we play this sort of variation of that, which is... So that's a drop thumb and a pull off. And the way we're going to end the song is the same way we end the A part, which is a hammer onto a C chord. I'm using the 4th string. Open 4th string. Pull off from 2nd fret to open on the 3rd string. 4th fret of the 4th string. And 1 claw hammer stroke on the open 3rd string. So that same ending we ended the A part with, which is... So it ends the same way. So that's the sort of basic version of the B part. So let's try playing it all together. I'm going to count it in. We're going to do it really slowly, and I'm going to play it 2 times through. So again, just like the A part, if you don't catch every section of it, that's okay. But see if you can jump on as and make sure that you can sort of follow as many sections as possible. So starting from the E minor chord, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Nice. Right on. I can see everyone's hands are in the right place. Like I said, you look like you all sound great. So let's maybe open up some questions for the B part. How's that working for everyone? It's a little simpler than the A section, so that should be okay. But see if we have any questions, and if not, I can keep moving on. Yeah. Okay, I see a question about the B7 section. So let's go over that B7 chord. Let's all find, and if you're already okay with this, then you can practice another section. But let's find, just to go over that B7 chord, let's find the E minor chord first. And now what we're going to do is we're going to leave, I'm going to bring this closer. So we're going to leave, our 3rd finger. We're going to leave, we're going to leave our 1st finger. I'm getting this all wrong. We're going to leave our 3rd finger on the 1st fret down. We're going to keep that there. Sorry about that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move our middle finger, which is on the 4th string, over to the 3rd string. So it's still on the same fret. So we have, let's all find this chord now. 2nd fret of the 3rd string and 2nd fret of the 1st string. Yeah, so we all find that. So that's just how you get to that next phrase. The thing that you want to do is you want to make sure you don't lift your hand off the whole chord to find this new chord, because it's going to take more time to then plant your hand back down on that. So we want to make sure that we don't lift that 1st string. We just do this really efficient move of moving over from the 4th string to the 3rd string. So that's the shape of the chord. And what we do is we slide that whole shape up 2 frets. So once we slide it, we should be at this final position, which is 4th fret of the 3rd string and 4th fret of the 1st string. Now, one thing I should mention, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, is that we don't actually want to play our open 4th string in this chord. It's not the end of the world if you do hit it, but if you can leave it out, this sort of makes the chord sound a little clearer. So what we're going to do is we're going to slide, then do a strum, a claw hammer strum. So we do that slide, and And I'm striking the third string for this whole phrase. Then we hit that third string again at the same place. So that's the B7 chord. Awesome. Nice. Yeah, it all sounds good. So why don't we just play the whole B section again one more time, and now we can incorporate that. So let's go from the top of the B section. 3, 4. Slide. Yeah, there we go. Hammer onto the C chord. Yeah, nice. That's totally it. Yeah, so that's the B section there. Again, feel free to keep adding questions if you have any more questions. But why don't we try and play the whole darn tune all together, the whole thing, kit and caboodle. So I'll count it in from the A section, and we'll just go straight into the B section. And the nice thing about the A section is it ends on just a open third string clawhammer strum, so it gives us a bit of time to find that E minor chord. So we want to make sure that when we're transitioning to the E minor chord of the B part, the very start, that we have that chord in place and ready to find it. So starting from the top at the 5th fret, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Nice. We're gonna do that again. And B part. Yeah. Again, B part. Nice. I can see a lot of people are really following on. That's great. That's awesome. I would like to say that, so this is not necessarily, like I said, something that you have to learn in this lesson because there's other video tutorials. And it also doesn't necessarily have to be just related to this one song. Like, my hopes for this class was that you would take a couple techniques of how to find certain notes and then be able to apply them to maybe another song that you're having a hard time figuring out how to play those phrases. So in learning this song, and what's very useful about the YouTube tutorials that you'll have a link to is that you actually have the ability to slow it up or speed down. So in the video I'll send you, I'll be playing through the arrangement at 2 different tempos. So you can slow that down to, keep an eye on the left hand or play at a tempo that's more comfortable to you. Or you can speed it up too. If you want to get it to regular sort of jam tempo, you'll have the ability to speed that up for practice, which is kind of useful. So let's just, before we sort of add some more variations, let's kind of just recap about some of the different techniques we used. So the first technique that was used right out of the bat, so that's using this 5th string here. I like to call it connecting the dots, basically. And it's a really useful tool that you can use for melodic structures. So in this one phrase alone that we've learned, there's so many songs I can think of that use this one phrase. It's just a very common phrase that starts on, I'm just trying to think of, if you've ever heard a tune called Lost Girl, you would have a song that sounds like... One example alone, you're using the same structure that we've just learned. So that's, and so...
Hey there, Frank. Can I
Yeah.
jump in with a quick question?
Absolutely.
My pal Jerry out there, hey Jerry, is asking about how you actually are able to reach your thumb around the neck, and asking, is there anything that you're doing with your hand to be able to fit your thumb all the way around? It sounds like she's having trouble, like, getting her thumb around.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, what am I doing here? My hand is definitely shifted up a little bit. I think when I'm anticipating phrases like this. Let's see if I can. It's going to be hard to show this on camera, but in terms of if I was regularly playing around the 5th fret, I think it would be closer to that 5th string tuner. But because I'm anticipating using this phrase, I think the palm of my hand, which is resting against the back of the neck, is definitely shifted up a little bit, so that makes it a little easier to grab. I think it does depend on the shape of your neck. So some people have sort of wider, thinner necks, but it also it's a muscle thing. So I think it's just going to take a little bit of doing over and over again to get that comfortable. It took me a while to actually be able to use it in a jam session. I think I had come up with arrangements that would incorporate it. But in terms of actually doing it on the fly where I was able to think of a phrase and be able to use it, it took a long time for me. And that, I think, is because it's a bit of a stretch, and it can often make the note sound muffled. That's often how it sounds.
And Frank, somebody else is asking about the why can't you just do a drop thumb to the 7th fret on the 1st string, which I think would be, I don't know if it's possible to do that. I don't. Like, like doing drop thumb on the same note that you just played with your index finger. I don't think you can do that.
I think this question was asked before. You can do that. There's a couple of things that make it difficult. One of the things is that you're going to be using the flesh of your thumb to play that 2nd note. So we're going to be striking. If you're able to get that to sound clear, you've unlocked some sort of magic power to playing the banjo, and you should be teaching this workshop. But I think it'd be very tricky to get those notes to sound clear. And that's because you're striking down with different textures on the same note at very high tempo. And so to get all those notes to sound clear, it would be very difficult. Whereas if you're playing that melodic line on different strings, it allows each note to have the space for it to, sound. As opposed to... So that would be my answer to that question. In the bluegrass style of playing, there is a technique that does use that, but again, you're using 2 different fingers, and you have picks on, they're the same texture, so you end up getting similar tones, but just using your hand, I think it would be very difficult to make that melodic structure fit. So that's the best way I can sort of answer that question. And then one more point on this style. So in terms of the recap, a couple of things. One more point on this is that the reason I like to use the fifth string is because it's easy visual for me. If we have this line like I was talking about at the beginning, which is you can sort of play it all on that first string, and you can see where you need to place your fingers in order to find those phrases. The next step of this to really incorporating this playing is to use the inner strings, so to move a little bit further down. And one example of that we can use is by playing this same phrase. So instead of playing at the 5th fret of the 1st string, thumb at the 7th fret of the 5th string, my pinky's at the 9th fret, we can make it a little bit simpler, but it's a little trickier to find. If we place our finger at the 8th fret of the 2nd string, so it should be the same note as the 5th fret of the 1st string, or at the 8th fret of the 2nd string, and we play the same phrase as if we did before, but just start on that string, we'll have the exact same phrase. And that's a lot closer together, a little easier to use. So I'll recap that again. I'm placing my finger at the 8th fret of the 2nd string, which is a G note. My thumb is wrapping around. Again, you can use your thumb or index finger. Thumb wrapping around to the 7th fret of the 5th string. Then striking the 9th fret of the 1st string. And then the open 5th string. So that's, for a lot of people, is going to be a lot easier to get. The reason that I usually start teaching this style is because it's visually easier to see how you're connecting the dots. You can't just play it on one string, you're connecting with the 5th string. But then, once you get comfortable with this technique, you can really use that in a whole different manner. So you can use that in many melodic structures. So that opens up a lot of doors just doing that one trick. So that's something that just takes a bit of experimenting on a case-to-case basis. So you find a song that has a melodic line in there that you're having a hard time figuring out, and see if you can use these techniques to incorporate that. Now, the other technique I want to discuss is the other. I would say that's a common way for me to add notes or connect the dots. And then the other technique that is very common that I saw a lot of banjo players use last night in the concert, Victor Furtado in particular, really uses this technique extremely effectively and is very insanely comfortable with being able to do this. It makes my head explode watching him, it's a very impressive how he can do it. But he does what's called, I call it a left-hand pizzicato. And so what it is just plucking a string with your left hand. So it's completely independent of what the right hand does. And this can actually be really useful for two things. It can be useful for adding a note to the melody. So it can, again, when we were talking at the beginning of the class, is that because our main right-hand technique for adding notes, if we want to, our clawhammer strum only allows us to do, basically half notes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and. But if we want to add more notes, we can do sort of double thumbing. And if we want to add even more notes, we can do drop thumbing. But the thing is with drop thumbing is our thumb is always dropping down to another string. So we're never ascending. And that's what makes it so difficult to move upwards in phrases. So this is one of the techniques that makes it easier to move up. So here, the way that we can incorporate this is by using it in the B section. And this is just one example of many you can use. But what we're going to do is... so what we have in this B section is we strike the low 4th string. We have an E minor chord. So that's our first phrase in the B section. So we're striking the 4th string. 1st string, open. And we have this 5th string ringing in between each note. Now, one of the ways we can add another melody note into that is by plucking the open first string with our hand, with the finger that's placed on that first string. So that would be, I'm striking the low string, and my finger's plucking. Then we actually carry out the B part as the same. So even slower is... And if you were to look at sort of a fiddle melody of how the melody of the B part goes, it would sound like this. So one of the ways we can get that note is by doing this pluck. And again, this will be in the tablature, so you can find this later. And if I play it up to tempo, you'll hear what that adds. So I'll play one B section without it. And now with it. So it adds this sort of extra melody note, which is, when your brain hears it, it makes a lot of sense. That is melodically where the song is supposed to go. So that's one way we can find a note ascending, is by plucking with our left hand. And so it's really tricky because, it's a lot like, drummers and piano players have completely, different ideas going simultaneously. Whereas the banjo often, or any stringed instrument, in order for this chord to ring, our right hand has to be connected in terms of what it does. It has to strike the chord, and the left hand has to be in place. And they have to all be in sync. Whereas in a piano player, you can have these two completely ideas going simultaneously, and they don't have to be in sync. They can be their own idea. And this is a bit like that to me, whereas all of a sudden the left hand is sort of divided itself from what the right hand is doing, and it can have these other melodic structures that don't rely on what the right hand's doing. So that's why I think it's sort of tricky for me to incorporate that. But once you have a couple of these phrases under your belt, it becomes a little easier. Maybe I'll open up to any questions of that technique, and if there are any questions out there, because you can use this in many different settings.
There's a good question here about the off-string pull-off. Are you striking your fifth string as well when you do the off-string pull-off?
Oh, good question. You can do that. That is something I've worked on. Extra points, whoever asked that. Then we have double stops going. It is a lot easier to not do that. I would suggest not doing that if you're finding this technique difficult, but it is kind of a cool effect you can get if you get those two notes going together. But that takes some serious brain power to put those, or at least for me. But so that is one option. So you can do that. To answer the question, yes, you can do that. But I'm, for this example, just using the open... I think Brad just called it an off-string pull-off, which I've never heard before, but that makes a lot of sense, too. Or I call left-hand pizzicato, so same idea. And I'm just trying to think of another example. I mean, you could do this. You can do this in a bunch of different things, but to play songs that have a slightly difficult phrase in it where it's really hard to find one note that's ascending. If there's something like Squirrel Hunters, for example. It's like, how do we go back to that note? That's our another note, and it's really hard to find that note. So we can do that by finding it with a left-hand pull-off. So just a technique, not that you have to learn that exact example, but that is just sort of another example in a song where finding this note that's going upwards is very difficult, and so that's one technique you can use. I mean, I can break that down for everyone if they want to learn that one section. I'm just playing a D7 chord. So just a drop thumb. And I'm placing that D7 chord, and then I'm striking, and my finger's pulling off, doing a left hand pull off on that second string. So it's sounding a C note. So that's just another example of how you can use this technique. But yeah. So yeah, that's sort of the idea behind it. And so let's see, if the questions keep coming in, people will let me know. Let me add one or two variations to the song, just because there's some fun things you can do with these chords. But again, if you have a question, interrupt at any point. One of the variations I like to do in this song is, and because there's so many chords, like I was saying, you can just play the chords in a different part of the neck, and you get a really nice different melodic change. So one of the places you can do that is in this A part. Is when we have this A chord to a D chord. You can just find that in a different spot of the neck, and a really nice place to do that for this one is I'm using, if we all find an F chord, an F shape, we're only working with the first through the third string, so just the top three strings. And we're going to move that all the way up to an A, so it means that our first string's at the 7th fret. Let's all see if we can find that A chord. So again, I'll review how to get there. We're going to make an F chord. I'm only using the first, second, and third string, so we can get rid of this 4th string. And I'm going to move that all the way up so that the first string's at the 7th fret. So it should make an A chord now. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a drop thumb. We're going to strike the 2nd string and drop thumb down to the 3rd string. And then do a regular claw hammer stroke. Let's do that one more time. Yeah, that's it. Then the next chord is a D7 chord. So what we're going to do, I'm going to see if I can move this closer. We're going to shift our first finger over to the 5th fret of the 3rd string. So it's going to shift over one string. So now it's on the 3rd string. I'm going to take our 3rd finger and place it on the 7th fret of the 2nd string. So we have this chord. So that's the shift. So we were here. Let's see if I can make this clearer. This is where the chord we were, which is the A chord. Now we're going to move this finger, our first finger, over to the 3rd string, still at the 5th fret. And we're going to move our 3rd finger to the 7th fret. So we have a D7 chord. And we do the same right hand technique, which is... So that sounds like this up to tempo. And that leads us back to the A part. So that's kind of a nice just change you can add in, which would be... And again, I'll have this in the tablature and also in the video, so you'll have a closer look at my hand of how to play this. But I'll play that up to tempo so you can hear how that sounds. And all we were doing there in terms of a technique of finding a variation is finding that same chord structure, but just in a different place of the neck. And you can do that anywhere in the neck, as long as you work out where those chords are. You know, so there's so many different options there. So that's kind of a cool technique you can use. So in about 8 minutes, we're going to open it up to the gates to questions, which will be a bit of a cacophony, I imagine, of questions. But before we do that, why don't we all try playing this arrangement together? And I'll count it. We'll play it 2 times through. Add as many variations. If you're finding this stuff really simple, then add as much as you want. And if you're finding it very difficult, just see what sections you can grab onto. And if you're not, just see if you can sort of jump on again when we get back to this top of the A part. So we're going to go from the A part. We're going to go fairly slowly. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Nice. And again. Nice. E minor, B part. Let's play the whole thing one more time. And again. And another A. Nice. And B section. And another B. Sorry. Nice. It sounds great. I mean, I can't hear you actually. I shouldn't say anything, but it looks like it sounds great.
Hey Frank, we've got a request for you to play it a few times up to tempo, and I would throw in all the fancy variation stuff that you can after you do what you taught at Tempo, just
Sure.
because people get the video and they'll be able to follow
Yeah,
it.
totally. Okay,
Oh,
I'll
and somebody wanted to know what new chord did you sneak in before playing the B part, and it was your B chord that started on the first fret of the fourth string.
Yeah, that was before starting the B part was that's classic, you know, tritones leading to major thirds is what that was. It's a B7 chord.
Is that a B?
B7. So it's a bit of a stretch. First fret of the fourth string, second fret of the third string, open second, and then fourth fret. That's sort of this. It's like a diminished sound.
Nice chord.
It's a nice chord. It's my
All
favorite.
right, so how about going through like what you taught at Tempo, and then just go to Frank Land for a couple rounds, and
Okay, here's Blackberry Blossom. Thanks again, guys, for joining me. This is great. I could see everyone's hands were really following along, so that's really good to know. All right, here we go to tempo. Blackberry Blossom.
Hey, before we take any further questions or anything like that, let's just give people a chance. Brad, if you can unmute everybody, and we're just going to give Frank a big shout out and clap so he can hear us, and a boatload.
Okay, I'll unmute everybody right now.
Okay, I'm ready.
Great. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Actually, I don't have headphones at the moment because my dog ate my headphones. Seriously, my dog ate my headphones. So you guys are blasting out of my speakers, my home stereo system. So it's loud. It's great.
So with we still have about 10 minutes left, so maybe now would be a good time to get in any last minute questions, just general. I muted everybody again, but just general questions about. It doesn't necessarily have to be related to Blackberry Blossom, but anything else you'd like to ask Frank, now's a good time to squeeze that in.
And while you're thinking of them, Frank, I'm going to pop a question to you, which is, how much of the method that you just showed us is based on the fact that you play bluegrass banjo and melodic bluegrass banjo?
Oh yeah, a lot of it. Yes, there's some things that definitely sparked me to want to help me connect the dots in terms of how to figure out some of those phrases. But again, clawhammer is really hard to play. There's a lot of hurdles in terms of playing melodic clawhammer, because with bluegrass, you have the ability to sort of switch between these different techniques. Like you can play single string, or you can play melodic, or you can just sort of do a Scruggsy approach to it. Whereas clawhammer, even though there's not saying there's different techniques of clawhammer, there are very much different techniques of clawhammer. But because it's sort of all wrapped around one right hand technique, I think it limits the amount of ways that you can, utilize the fretboard essentially. So I think you have to really utilize different right hand and left hand techniques that are not as simple as just finding the note on the fretboard and then just being able to play it like that. It's because you have this really ingrained right hand technique that doesn't allow for a lot of variation, and so I think you have to. I think a lot of it started with playing bluegrass, melodic bluegrass playing, and then I picked up a lot of the rest of the stuff from sitting down with it. It's sort of like piecing a puzzle together. And Brad, I know, and Cathy, you all play very melodic styles too, and so I'm sure you all have these different tricks that I'm not sure how you stumble upon them, but you do. It's usually just out of trying to fit a phrase together out of one song that's kind of difficult, and then after doing that, you find out a whole new technique.
There are also many ways of playing this. There sometimes can be multiple ways to play the same melodic passage, so you end up seeking out the one that sounds tonally the most rich or clear. You know, like a hammer-on is not as clear as a pull-off or an alternate string pull-off or pizzicato, as you called it. There are some questions in here.
Totally.
Like when you were ripping around the improv that improv that you were doing up the neck, or have you practiced those specifically? I'm gonna guess that you were kind of winging it.
I was winging
Load
it.
of practice.
Yeah, it's practice to allow yourself to wing it. Yeah, I think that's probably the answer to that one.
I think it's the sort of age-old conversation of whether it's actual improvisation or if it's I've played all those things before, so I have rehearsed them. I haven't rehearsed them necessarily in that order, but I have definitely practiced all those things, and so it's not necessarily improvising in the sense that it's complete new territory to me. But after you get a lot of those phrases together, you can sort of play them comfortably at up to tempo. And I think the more you work on this stuff, especially like some of the melodic stuff we worked on today, you'll be quite pleasantly surprised at how often these phrases get recycled in every tune So it's going to come up very quickly where you've already learned how to play one of those phrases just from learning another tune. So that's kind of a nice discussion.
Right, as you sort of add to your toolbox. Another question, I think a good one here, which is kind of on the flip side. We've talked so much today about adding in more notes if you're taking a lead, but if you're playing backup, do you have like a go-to pattern, or do you have different variations on drop thumb or bum ditties or something? How would you back up this tune? I know there's a lot of ways to answer that.
Yeah, there's one. This is kind of a thing I just started teaching not so long ago, but I kind of like this exercise where you can back up, and this is sort of like a modern-y clawhammer style of backup. But I'll just play it for you, and then I'll break it down. So if the beat is here, like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's sort of this drop thumbing thing, and one of the ways you can really experiment with that is by doing it really slowly and progressively taking out notes in that phrase. So we start off with, it's just a drop thumb. I'm striking the first string, so dropping them, and then striking the first string again, picking up with the fifth. Just doing this over and over again. And a good exercise to do is just take one of those notes out. So you could take the fifth string out. You could go. Or you could take the drop thumb out. Or you could take the first string out. And then when you add them back in, you have this sort of patchwork of different rhythms you can get. So that kind of allows you to do like. So a lot of that sort of backup stuff is you can play around with that. So that's kind of a fun exercise for you to do that I just sort of recently figured out how to teach, I guess.
There's just a general question here about, as we're almost out of time here, when you play with your band, the Slow Can Ramblers, how do you decide whether to play a clawhammer or three-finger style on a particular tune?
Often it's just as simple as trying them both out. There's certain songs that, the bluegrass banjo it is what it is. It sounds like how it sounds. It's just loud. It's punchy. It's got finger picks and everything. And it's just kind of an obvious right fit for that song. But sometimes I think that's the approach of the band, is trying to maybe have a bluegrass rhythm section with a more old-timey influences kind of thing. So often, if it's an obvious choice to play the bluegrass banjo, we'll see what it sounds like with the clawhammer and see if it works or if we can make it work. So yeah, I guess the answer to the question is try them both out and see which one actually sounds best. You can, it can be definitely, you can fall into patterns of being like, oh, this is a folky song, therefore we're going to use clawhammer banjo. And so I try and steer away from that, because then it can sound a bit formulaic. So trying to maybe go slightly unexpectedly in terms of the decision making.
Well, I think we're pretty much out of time here.
I've just posted Frank's email. Just
Great.
about every workshop, somebody's popped a question of, hey, if we want to tip the instructor a little extra, how do we do that? So Frank's email is there if you want to send him some extra love, and you will be getting an email from him with all the links and handouts to today's workshop.
Yeah, and thanks, guys. I really do appreciate it.
Well, we're looking
hope
forward
you're all
to
doing
seeing
well
you tonight, and everybody, make sure you bring your friends and have a virtual party on YouTube tonight during the concert that starts at 7:30.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm just gonna be playing Settlers. Actually, is my
Yeah. We'll just have a big Zoom game with all 300 of the participants.
Perfect.
Sounds great. All right. Well, thanks, Frank. Let's all give Frank a big round of applause and wave. I'll unmute you, and we'll see you soon.
Thank
you.
Thanks, Frank.
Oh, you're awesome.
Very much. Great.
Thanks, Frank.
Woo!
Frank.
Yeah. So great.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Much appreciated.
All right. So long, everybody. Thanks for joining us. You can
See you
sign
later.
out now, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Frank, stick around for a minute and we'll chat.
Thank
and we'll...
you. Thank you.
Yeah. That was
Thanks,
fun.
Frank.
Hey, thank you. Woo. Look at all these banjo players. Yeah.
I like this one. I should use that one more.
Yeah, that's a
great
great
word.
chord.
Yeah. Especially the walk down.
Have you ever done the walk down like? You can just
Right.
a little further.
That's
Yeah.
a nice one. Or you can do it up here.
Totally. Yeah, that. Yeah, it's pretty funky. Yeah.
A
I
little
like this
vibrato
one
in
though.
there, you're golden.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, you can all those wiggles.
Yeah.
So let's kick out the rest of these folks. See you later, everybody.
Yeah, I started.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to get rid of everybody. I think they just probably walked away from their computer.
Right.
Cool. Well, that went really well. That was really
That
nice.
was great, Frank.
Oh, I'm glad. It's
Yeah.
always hard to tell.